Hello, Professor. My name is Michael Petrullo, and the topic I will be speaking about today is deep-rooted issues in Dominican society, and what are the reactions to injustice. There we go, sorry. These sources that I chose today were the fight surrounding abortion in the Dominican Republic. This was a very recent video discussion, taken about 2 years ago, being spoken on by Lorgia Garcia Pena and Esther Hernandez Medina. Sorry in advance for any incorrect pronunciations. The second source that I chose that was offered was Translating Blackness, Dominicans, Negotiating Race and Belonging. It's an article written by the same person in the first source, actually, Lorgia Garcia Pena, and she speaks on deep-rooted race issues within the Dominican Republic, and I believe that article was written in 2012. The other two sources that I have chosen myself were, and there's actually two instead of one, I hope that's okay. The first source I chose was a Social Watch report written in 2012, titled Inequality is the Biggest Obstacle. This is a very general overview of the state of affairs in the Dominican Republic that highlights a lot of issues really well. It takes more of an analytical approach as to why things are the way they are instead of a opinionated one or from the perspective of somebody else. And if that was going to be an issue, I picked a second source from Trujillo, a full-size portrait, which was actually a book written way back in the 1940s on President Trujillo and his various things that he accomplished and his opinion on things and more. So I guess without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right into it. The fight surrounding abortion is a sad situation, unfortunately. The Dominican Republic is only one of 6 countries in Latin America that penalizes abortion. This source focuses heavily on the journey of women and other groups in their efforts to decriminalize abortion through their proper legal means. Specifically, it's being hosted by Lorgia Garcia Pena and Esther Hernandez Medina, and it details them discussing the political climate surrounding the political climate surrounding abortion in the Dominican Republic. One of the primary reasons put forth by the women in advocacy for the legalization of abortion is some of the terrible conditions that pregnancies can come to be. Pregnancies that come from rape and incest typically cause extreme amount of emotional and physical distress on the mother. Considering the decreasing restrictions on what women can and can't do with their body globally, in such cases like these, it seems cruel to force a mother to carry a baby from such circumstances to birth. Esther, specifically, has been a part of the fight against the abortion outlawing for the past 20 years. Esther goes on to explain that every time the Penal Code, which is the law dictating that abortion is illegal, comes into review by the government, women march and protest in favor to overturn the ban. This fight continues even harder today. According to Esther, around March 11th, a feminist camp that was titled El Campamento de las Casuales has formed as an official organization to benefit women and fight in an organized effort to overturn the ban. The cultural situation that leads to these kinds of situations is expanded upon in the source. One of the women begins to speak on gender roles in Dominican society. According to one of the speakers, women's lives are considered less important than men's lives. Such protests for abortion have further opened up the discussion to issues like this, which is good. And after analyzing the source, a lot of this stuff was allowed to sit in my head, and I have a lot of interesting feelings towards them. I personally believe that abortion is a human right. So naturally, my opinions are very in line with what the women speaking were. I personally believe that women fighting for their rights are incredibly brave. In a long-standing misogynistic society, women are constantly forced to fight for their rights. I think that the women and people associated with El Campamento de las Casuales are benefiting not just the Dominican Republic, but the entire world by putting these issues on the forefront and bringing them into public eye. I gotta say that by bringing these issues into the public eye, I'm hopeful that they can at least get vocal support from the rest of the world. Not only do they deserve it, but when we're looking at this from a more from a more global perspective, fights like these need to be supported by people who support these things. Countries specifically, I believe, need to take a stand behind the women. going on these marches, because they're fighting against a very misogynistic government, and it's unfortunate that they even have to in the first place. But when we're talking about things from the perspective of making the world a better place, conclusions, where we can go from here, I'm hoping that I'm hoping that parts of the world that already have these rights are able to rally behind these people and women much more than they already are. I think that they really, really deserve it. So I'm hoping that the future is bright in regards to this. It seems like it. We have beautiful organizations like El Campamento. I apologize if my pronunciation is wrong. El Campamento de las Casuales, that was spoken about during the discussion that they had in the source. It's just really, I really hope the best for them and everything. The second source that I went over was Translating Blackness, Negotiating Race and Responding. Translating Blackness begins by detailing the time period around November of 2012, when more than 2 million Dominicans took to the streets to peacefully protest against a series of unfavorable measures laid out by the new president, Danilo Medina. We are being told this through the perspective of Lorgia Garcia Pena, who at the time of the 2012 march was unfortunately residing in southern USA. Despite wanting to stand with her brothers and sisters, she was unable to. She went on to describe hundreds of photos and videos she saw of this march and how it affected her seeing all of this. When referencing a supposed protester who held up a sign asking for Obama's aid due to a similar skin color, the true message of the article, in my eyes, makes itself apparent. She begins to speak on how, in her eyes, from the perspective of Lorgia, that through her eyes, according to her, Dominicans don't see themselves as how this man seemed to see them. She feels that referencing Obama at all was pointless. This wasn't a race issue, more of an issue of human rights. She actually mentions, Torres Sayant, who I know we had read a lot about in class earlier. She quoted him when he was speaking on a similar topic in the past. And on this topic, when he was speaking on it, he stated, "The black as a socio-logically differentiated segment of the population does not exist in the Dominican imagination." And, how I interpreted this anyway, because it wasn't made super clear, but how I interpreted this was that, race isn't even visible to people living in the Dominican Republic. They don't even see race the way that, most of the world does. Race isn't even it's not even a thought that enters their mind, which is something to really take notes from, because that's how everybody should see race. That it shouldn't even be a point of conversation. People should be judged on the conduct of their character. But anyways, the topic then swayed into the conversation of what Dominican blackness really is. The colonizers forcing labor upon the colonies was not something they wanted to identify with, but the standards that have been set have been very hard to brush off. She goes on to explain further that race being a social construct is not always clear, nor is it always the reason for the conflict. So on top of what you have, Torres Sayant saying, you also have Esther. You also have Lorgia, explaining that this is not a race issue. We shouldn't be looking towards people like, we can't now obviously, but Obama and other colored leaders to help, because this is not a race issue. We're not having problems in the Dominican Republic because people are racist or because people are, we might be, but that's not not according to the source anyway. But because it's more so a humanitarian issue above a race issue, which I think is really important. And reading about the amount of injustice and protests going on currently in the DR, it solidifies how lucky I am in my mind to live in this country. It's hard for me personally to relate to any of the issues Lorgia Garcia Pena has spoken on, but I certainly have my opinions towards them. I agree with pretty much everything she said, and after reading through her perspective, the protests, among other things that were similar in Source 1, I support and agree with. It's always hard to hear about the injustices caused by colonization and that the nations, like the Dominican Republic, still face and receive no proper aid in dealing with. I think that the freedom fighters look to each other for support instead of looking towards other nations like that man with the Obama poster did. I think that freedom fighters have, people who fight for freedom, have strength and confidence in their identity and what they fight for. And I'm referring specifically to the protesters in the Dominican Republic here. I hope they tear down social constructs and issues caused by race and gender down for the betterment of not just their country, but the world. If they succeed, then the positions would change. They wouldn't be looking to us for where to go for support. Instead, we would be looking into the Dominican Republic for how to properly change the constructs of society for the better. Right? And now my two personal sources I'm actually going to go over quickly in an effort to save time, because I'm probably way above 5 minutes at this point. If not, I will be. But basically, there were two sources grouped into this slide. The first source, which is the Social Watch that I was talking about. You can see the two graphs at the top are from the Social Watch. The Social Watch has an extremely valuable collection of data detailing the current issues that exist in the Dominican Republic. The article goes over both current systematic issues in the Republic as well as steps taken by the government recently to fix these issues. It is a very objective source, so there's not much opinions here, but it was by far the best source I could find that highlighted the issues so well. It does seem that as of recent, the Dominican Republic has made some strides in the correct direction when it comes to certain societal issues. In 2006, for example, the government set up the Ministry of Economy, Planning, and Development in an effort to stimulate the economy and redistribute wealth. A big issue in the Dominican Republic is the unequal wealth, distribution and mass poverty. Among this, there has been a centralized effort to transform the Republic into a middle-class society, quote-unquote, as they put it, and it seems to have been working on the surface. Only on the surface. It even mentions that today's level of economic activity is roughly 12 times greater than what it was in 1960 in the Dominican Republic. Despite this supposed economic growth, though, the areas of society that are still in dire need of revamping persist. Education is still seriously underfunded. Violence against minorities like Haitian immigrants and women still persist. The environment surrounding has been destroyed due to farming the resources of the land too much, and this part is specifically due to the fault of the colonizers. While it seems grim, it's important to highlight the lack of progress towards pushing society forward when many people put the economy above all else. Education is important. With an educated populace, some long-standing issues might dissipate within a few generations naturally. The second source that I chose to go over was an interview conducted between a reporter and the President Trujillo during the year 1939. Now, it might seem weird for me to fragment a 1939 interview directly after talking about a factual report taken a couple years ago, but I have a reason for this actually. I really wanted to mention President Trujillo's speech, specifically after everything, and topics on education came into play, because I wanted to compare how things were in 1940 from Trujillo's eyes to how they are today. I know 80 years in the past it's not really worth looking into to some people, but I feel like comparing President Trujillo's views and opinions to the current state of the Dominican, government today, I think is important. I think we can find a nice I think we can get a nice contrast between how the two people and how the two countries were ruled back then, and maybe we could see, I don't know, maybe we could see some discussion that pops up, or maybe we could see something interesting that we weren't able to see, before. But going on. The most interesting point of conversation that was held during the interview with Trujillo, in my opinion, was when he was asked about education. We know from the last source that education is underfunded in the Dominican Republic today, massively so. When the topic of education came up to Trujillo, he said, "The National University is being completely reorganized and will have new buildings." He went on to say that a new law has just been passed for the care of the National Collection of Archives of the Nation, and that precious fountain of our past glories containing notable documents will come back into play, because until now it has been little more than a warehouse for old papers. Next month, construction begins of a superb palace that contains these archives and National Library, which will be created, which will have about 300,000 volumes. That institution will be the pride of this city. With the way he's talking, it seems like he had Trujillo specifically, it seems like he had big plans for expanding education, but, I don't know how many of it came into play, considering the state of Dominican education today. Hopefully for the future, it'll be clear how important investing in education is, as clearly, Trujillo thought it was. It's a rough contrast to what, the education system is today. What Trujillo wanted, it seemed like Trujillo wanted to invest a lot into education, even calling a college that he wanted to make a palace. But nowadays, it seems like education is severely underfunded. It's disappointing. The two sources I grouped together on purpose, though. I feel like they go together well for the point that I'm trying to illustrate, and my opinion is as follows. I think the country needs to invest more in education. Naturally, I think this is much easier said than done. If it was that easy, I'm sure it'd be getting done already. I assume the myriad of other economic and political issues the country is facing currently is the main cause that education funding has been stagnated, but I feel personally that education should go above a lot of other things. With a more formally educated populace comes less systematic issues that are formed for illogical reasons. I believe that if children were better educated as they grew up, cultural and systematic problems could be weeded out without any serious intervention. If this is blatantly naive for me to think, fair enough, but the benefits of education could certainly do things such as help the country find a better leader that through his education knows exactly how to help the country in the areas they need the most. Anyways, in an effort to not have it go on too long, I think I'm going to end it here. So thank you very much for watching my presentation, and I hope you have a good day.